1 year ago today, tomorrow, this week, a Boise neighborhood woke up to strange chaos. A horde of goats. Remember these guys? They were really popular. They went lawn to lawn, eating everything in sight. And the spectacle, it made headlines not just here in Boise, but around the world. This morning, we take a dramatic look back at the Boise goat invasion.
They kind of just took over the neighborhood this morning.
August 3rd, 2018.
I was very confused.
A horde of hungry goats took over a quiet Boise neighborhood.
Mayhem. A ton of goats got loose. I don't know how.
The tribe moved down the street and quickly devastated the lawn landscapes.
They're just everywhere. When we walked around the corner, we didn't realize how many goats there would be.
There were 118, each leaving a signature outlined in yard clippings.
I don't like it because they're eating my grass right now.
Neighbors were forced to simply watch the destruction.
They ate a lot. They kept moving back and forth. They kept jumping up to eat from the trees, and they mowed almost every lawn.
Others, though, started asking questions.
This is completely random. How did they even get here? Where did they come from?
Word of the situation quickly made it to the police. They too wanted to know, where did these goats come from?
Hey, this is the police department. When are you going to be here?
That was only one of the many questions that Kim Gabika faced that day. As it turned out, the goats were the property of her and her husband's company, We Rent Goats. Their business is to dispatch the goats to clear weeds and suppress plant growth on public and private land. This time, though, the goats had gone rogue.
Managed to break through the fence and go on a little adventure to meet the neighbors.
After hours of chaos, they were rounded up and taken away, leaving the neighbors to process what had happened. Some annoyed, others celebrated the unique spectacle. Everyone who saw it, though, shared one sentiment.
I'm going to remember this.
Never forget the Boise goat invasion of 2018.
That was spectacular.
Yeah.
And it all just kind of came out randomly because somebody called and said, hey, there are a bunch of goats.
Yeah.
It still blows my mind because that could have been a really small story. I was like, that's cute. But it was honestly one of the headlines of the day around the world.
Yeah.
A year ago.
It was fun. The timing was perfect.
This is actually one of the front pages of the New York Times. It didn't make there it is. Invasion briefly turns Boise into a petting zoo. That's the New York Times right there. Daniel Victor wrote the articles.
But you talked to him and who else?
Washington Post, NPR, talked to international media in Japan and Sweden and England. It was interesting too. I was having to have people say, oh, we want to interview you, but you already talked to our competitor.
Yeah.
So I guess not. And I was agreeing to all the interviews.
Yeah, sure.
And then they're like, well, you already agreed to one with our competitor. I was like, oh, I'm sorry. So it was a whole thing. It was awesome though.
But it was just interesting to see how, as the goats spread through the neighborhood, the story then spread through the world.
It was, yeah.
It just took off.
Well, I still remember some of the live stuff that you did from that last year. When you're just standing there and the goats are just like killing a rose bush and all that too.
Yeah, that was pretty wild.
That was good stuff, yeah.
And
That's
I have
the
to give,
tweet, too,
and I
that
have
went
to give
viral.
kudos to a lot of the neighbors there who took it with a grain of salt. They're
They
like,
did, yeah.
what are you
Well,
going to do?
yeah,
They
yeah,
damaged a
exactly,
lot of
yeah,
landscaping.
yeah.
Well, that could have been like a big problem, and people could have been threatening lawsuits and insurance. But everyone on that neighborhood street was so kind and friendly, and sure, some homeowners were disappointed that the rose bushes got destroyed. But
Certainly.
shout out to the Summerwind Drive in the Boise area.
Well, plus the way that then the kids came out and just kind of had fun just petting the goats.
Oh yeah,
It was
those
just
the kids were having
Yeah.
fun with those kids.
With the
All right, well, let's goat on to the next story.
Okay.
Hey,
On the hoof
you're
for
actually,
that one,
and
yeah.
we're
Oh,
actually
it's my
going
story.
from goats to
Okay.
goat heads.
We go to our Joe Parrish. Joe, what do you have for us? Oh, thank you, Joe. Well, it's Friday. Happy Friday, everyone.
Yeah.
There's a lot of events going on this weekend. Doug mentioned the Boise Goat Head Fest, totally unrelated to
this.
that, but coming up at 6:30, we've got events, including this one. What is it? We'll tell you after the break.